We are very honored that the Honorable Paul Hellyer has consented to do an interview with us here at Area 51 Magazine because we've been following his disclosure statement from the symposium here in Toronto. And I wanted to ask him a few questions because so many of us are curious why the Honorable Paul Hellyer would even come out with using terms that are so unpopular in politics. So I think we'll start by asking him, when did you get interested in the whole entire UFO field? When were you curious about what was in the skies? Was it when you were working as defense minister? Was that a curiosity? Was it when you were young? When was it?
Not really. It's very recent. When I was Minister of National Defense, I had reports crossing my desk about sightings, but they just indicated whether or not there was some natural explanation or whether there wasn't. And I was far too busy at the time to worry about it very much because I was the minister who unified the Canadian Armed Forces, the Royal Canadian Navy, the Royal Canadian Air Force, and the Canadian Army into a single armed force, and this was really, unprecedented in the Western world. And Robert McNamara, who was the U.S. Secretary of Defense at the time, said this is what all the ministers wanted to do but didn't have the guts to do. But so this was it was war really to accomplish this.
This was McNamara under Kennedy. Was it the Kennedy administration?
Yeah,
okay,
right.
So it was the 60s.
Yeah, so this was in
Okay.
the 1960s, and so I was just too busy to be curious about, UFOs and other things. So it was only, I suppose, in very recent times when some friends have started sending me things, and frankly, I usually was too busy to read them, or thought I was, and I kept putting them off and putting them on the shelf for future reference. And I must admit that it was only after I took Colonel Corso's book to my little lodge in Muskoka a year ago and sat down and read it, that it really tweaked my interest because I knew right away that it was real. And I said, hey, this is something that I want to find out about because it's important and there are a lot of policy issues that I'm going to have to think about.
This book, who gave it to you?
I guess it was Pierre Junot.
Okay.
Pierre Junot has been sending me quite a bit of stuff, and he's very judicious. He knows that I'm overloaded, and you looked at my desk earlier, so you know that it's true. And
but you're an activist. You're in many areas.
Well, that's true. Yes, and just going night and day. People ask me what I do now that I'm retired, and I said, well, the only difference is I only work 6 days a week now. But and it's more or less true. But I read that, and I knew that it was authentic. I asked myself, would anyone be capable of making that in fiction? Because I only read a few books a year. The previous year I'd read The Life of Pi when I was on my vacation. And it was so convincing that I couldn't make up my mind 100% until right at the end whether it was fact or fiction. And I said, is there any possibility that this book could be fiction? And the answer that I concluded was no, it couldn't, because there are too many times, too many places, too many names, and too many references that I understand and know, and as a former Minister of National Defense would recognize as being legitimate, that I can't dismiss this. This is the real thing. And so all of a sudden I became deeply interested and, may I say, deeply concerned.
Okay, and I also know, because it was part of a story that was written about you, that you called, I think it was a 4-star general in the United States, to confirm that what Colonel Corso was saying was
well,
possible.
I'm not at liberty to say who it was or how many stars he had, but when I was reading the book, my nephew came along and asked me what I was reading, and I told him. And so he was, like a large proportion of the population, a skeptic, and didn't mind admitting it. So he went away and he was only there for a few days. And I guess a couple of weeks later he phoned me and said I'd been talking to my friend, the retired general, and I told him about this book. And he said, quote, "Every word is true and more," end of quote. And he said, "Now I want to get my hands on that book."
Well, the book was a bestseller, and it did come out programmed for the 50th anniversary of the Roswell crash.
Right.
And we have groups that believe that Roswell didn't even happen, where Colonel Corso in the book and in The Dawning of a New Age, which are his original notes, he talks about seeing a body at Fort Riley, Kansas. Not just his work at the Pentagon, it's the fact that he did see also an alien body, which is very important. So you're telling me that this changed the way you thought about a lot of things, and you were curious, and you also considered it serious. Did you consider it serious because it's a matter of national security, or did you consider it serious because as a human being it changed the way you looked at the world?
It made me very curious and concerned, because I understand policy issues when they stare me in the face. And so I said, there are all kinds of policy issues here. First of all, General Nathan Twining, right at the beginning, designated these people as enemy aliens. And so my first question is, are they still designated enemy aliens? Because if they are, then the United States Armed Forces are preparing to kill them. And I asked myself, well, if they start taking on a superior technology, what is going to happen? Are they just going to take it, or are they going to retaliate? What are the consequences of such a thing for the United States, for the world? And I think it's just absolutely tremendously important. And then, of course, other policy considerations are, well, if this technology is so absolutely wonderful, it has the makings of saving our planet from environmental destruction. We could get away from burning fossil fuels and save the ozone layer and stop the melting of the ice caps and the raising the water levels worldwide, and stop disrupting the weather patterns in a way that have really upset a lot of people, and are upsetting people more, I think, than perhaps they are willing to admit. And so this is tremendously important too, number two. And the third one, of course, is it sort of reinforces, because I know that the officials are not telling the truth about Roswell. I know that. I heard some of them on television not too long ago, where some of the party line was still, well, it was a weather balloon. And I heard dozens of other people saying they'd been sworn to secrecy. I said, wait a minute, give me a break. You're swearing people to secrecy because a weather balloon crashes? Talk about being...
It's not logical, yeah.
Well, it's not credible, So when we're talking about these things, they can accuse people who say that the crash was real, not being credible, but I would say the people who say that it was a weather balloon are by no means credible. So I say to myself, this really, the whole cover-up, because I'm convinced that there has been a systematic, thorough, and very successful cover-up for half a century or more. The whole cover-up really lends credence to Latham Lapham's theory of the two governments. And I suspect you're familiar with that. But
the shadow government and the real government?
Well, he calls the real and the provisional, or the permanent and the provisional.
Right.
And he says that the United States government, the permanent government, is the Fortune 500 list, and the top legal firms in Washington that do their legal work, and the top PR companies that do their public relations or propaganda, if you want to be a little more vulgar about it, and the top civil servants, both military and civil, and they run the United States. And every few years, and here I paraphrase a little bit with the license that I have as a former politician, they have a charade called an election. And the permanent government picks the actors to go on stage and read the scripts written by the permanent government. And they try to pick actors that won't improvise too much and who will do as they're told, in effect. And then they give them the money to get elected. And nobody else need apply, because it's become such an expensive business, and especially in the United States, where they raise this huge, astronomical amounts of money to get elected. Anyone who hasn't got the backing of the establishment just isn't in the race. They call it democracy, but this is just nonsense. So it just confirms for me that we've got a real problem in countries that we call democracies, where we are basically the pawns of people who consider themselves to be the proprietors or the owners of our society, and it doesn't often matter who we elect, that they're just not going to change anything of significance. So these are fundamental policy questions that intrigue me, not just intrigue me, but which I think have to be resolved for the benefit of, first of all, the United States, but for all mankind, because we tag along with the United States. Whatever they do, we're involved in. And I guess it's today's paper, our new Minister of National Defense, under the new minority government, Stephen Harper, has said that they're going to reopen the question of the anti-missile defense. Well, right away, my antenna goes up. I say, hey, we're going to become part of this business of building a system designed to take the alien intruders on for size. Do we want to be part of that? Certainly, do we want to be part of it without knowing what we're doing, which is obviously the case. Does our Prime Minister, is he in the loop of this? Absolutely not. I'm sure he's not. Is our Minister of Defense, who is the Brigadier General, in the loop? Well, I'm sure he's not. He's just going along with the conventional wisdom that we have to build a system to protect us against rogue missiles from heaven only knows where, and party line cover stories. And I say, hey, this isn't good enough. We've got to have some facts and figures and some real hard information before we start spending money and time and diverting resources from far more important things to be part of a project that probably is not good for us.
So you are for disclosure. You realize, if this seems like you're saying you are for disclosure, if you're for disclosure, do you realize it's like pulling the rug under from out of a lot of institutions that are well established, including the financial, the religious, the political institutions, and that is the excuse a lot of people have been using for keeping the secret secret? How would you deal with that?
Well, I believe in seeking the truth, and in the good book it says if you seek the truth, it'll make you free. And I don't think there's any other approach. I don't think you can live a lie. I'm a religious person. I'm not the least bit concerned about disclosure. And I'm absolutely determined that we find out what the truth is. And I think it's just natural and inevitable that there are other species elsewhere in the galaxy or galaxies that are more advanced technologically than we are, and probably morally and spiritually as well, and that we should cooperate with them and learn from them and work together to I'm used to saying make a better world. Well, we'll start with trying to make our world better, but maybe we can cooperate in making a better galaxy or galaxies, and that these are the kinds of projects and policies that we should be adopting, and not trying to spend billions and billions of dollars when we have hundreds of millions of people on our own planet dying from starvation and ill health. And I put in the scale of justice a few $100 billion for another project that happens to fit the temperament of the military-industrial complex, as against saving a few 100 million lives of people who otherwise don't have a chance, because We're just not helping them when we have the capacity and the resources to help them and to give them a more abundant life.
Well, this is also entering into a philosophy, and as a ufologist, I feel that we have plenty of sightings. We've been recording them forever. We have thousands and thousands. This is a phenomenon that from South America to Europe to Asia, we have enough proof that there are sightings of these anomalous objects. Now we're into the philosophy of what do we do with the truth? What do we do? What are the policy issues? And this goes into a brand new area that Dr. Michael Sala and Alfred Weber are interested in, called exopolitics. Would you agree that in the future we need to get together, even on a grassroots level, since the politicians aren't all doing it, to develop some policies concerning contact?
Well, I'm sure we have to do something, and I applaud them for their efforts. We have to do something positive by way of cooperation. And Alfred Weber suggested a 10-year period of contact and cooperation. And I think that would be marvelous. And heaven only knows where it would lead, but I think it would be far, far more positive than spending the next 10 years trying to build a military system capable of starting an intergalactic war.
Which we might not win.
Well, of course not.
I know people aren't taking
But that's
that.
a possibility that some military people would never take into account, you see. They'll say, we'll just keep working until we have the best and we win. And I understand the military mind.
And it's also a war makes money. So we're dealing with a complex that needs to live on the money-making situation.
It only makes money for some people. It puts the rest of us in debt.
Yeah.
Because under our very peculiar monetary system, which is, as you may or may not know, one of my principal lifetime interests.
Yes, I see you have other books written on this area. I did not know you were so prolific in surviving the global financial crisis and Agenda Plan for Action. You have written several books about the monetary system.
So, this is such a peculiar system that we expand the money supply to win a war. But the way we do it is by going further into debt. And consequently, every time we have another war, the people have this additional debt burden put on them, while the few people that own the munitions factories are the beneficiaries. And the people who own the beneficiaries of the munitions factories are not the ones that go and do the fighting. They're the ones that have the luxury continue during the wartime period by one means or another. And it's the ordinary people that do the fighting and lose their brothers and sons and fathers and uncles, and then have to carry the debt afterwards instead of having the freedom to regroup their lives and make them better. So there are some absolutely humongous policy issues involved, and I think that they're so big. I find it difficult to find words to describe them.
And on a grassroots level, if you were to give us advice, now you were using a lot of what you say in our Area 51 magazine because you've been courageous enough to come out with asking President Bush to, reconsider building a base on the moon and so forth. On a grassroots level, those people that realize that what you're saying is very wise and what you're saying is really the truth, what advice would you give us all to do any kind of changing, to look at a better future on a grassroots level? Because you're dealing with the political level, and so you're speaking as someone who has a certain position. But us, the people, what would you suggest we do?
Well, I think, first of all, the people have to inform themselves as best they can with the information available. And there's a lot of information. You were saying that Disclosure Project drew no press.
Yeah. Stephen Greer's Disclosure Project had all the necessary qualifications of a very well-orchestrated media event about the truth of UFOs, but it drew no press.
Maybe we have to use the internet globally to spread the word, and then use that as a political vehicle to get grassroots people to demand of their politicians some action. And in Canada, recently, a group of friends are asking the Senate Defense Committee to hold an inquiry. and to interview some of the people that Dr. Greer had assembled and some of the others that you know,
Right.
and to talk to them. And I think in Canada they would get some press.
But do you think that Canada will receive outside pressure not to do that?
They may, but if they buckle under, it will just be one more
Cover up.
one more disappointing aspect of our sometimes being too concerned with what the elephant tells us to do.
Okay.
So, but I think it would, if we did it here, it
Right.
could provide some pressure, because even though most of the communications go north from south to north, it's not unknown that if you go north to south, and the few people in the United States listen to the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation and so on, and if we got enough publicity here, some of it would leak south of the border, and I think encourage more Americans to demand that Congress do something. I think they should also demand of members of Congress, what are you doing with our money? You know, what projects, what secret projects are there? And what are the consequences, militarily and otherwise, of the projects that are being undertaken? And do you consider these people enemy aliens? And if so, why? Prove it to us, you know, show us the evidence. And I think the only thing we can do is to just keep putting pressure on politicians and saying, hey, you know, you're elected to look after our interests, not to do what intelligence organizations tell you to do. They're not elected by anybody. They're not accountable to anybody. They're just a bunch of people who think they sort of own the world and have their own little club, and they lie to each other. And I guess once you get in the habit, why, it kind of spills over in what you're likely to tell the public. So I think we have a very great responsibility to try and put the pressure on the politicians to say, time has come, full disclosure, let us know, and then we can decide whether we want to embark on a project of trying to save our planet in cooperation with others, or whether we want to let you continue on the road of making bigger and better hydrogen bombs to blow up bunkers and do a lot of things which are ultimately going to result in an uninhabitable planet, or virtually uninhabitable. And that seems to be the choice.
Okay, to wrap up this interview, you had mentioned that you're writing another book. And you had mentioned that you are going to dedicate a chapter to this subject. Because we need more of that. So can you just give us a little inkling about what that chapter will say or will reflect?
Well, basically the things I've just been saying to you, but with starting off with evidence from people who have had personal experience in these areas. I'm not going to give a lot of examples because, you know, you can't put much in one chapter.
Right.
And I don't want the book to be too long. I'd like some people to read it. So to maybe get 8 or 10 at the most people who have personal knowledge, and talk to them myself so that I can quote them verbatim and say, these are credible witnesses. I believe them to be telling the truth. I do not believe a lot of other people are telling the truth. And the time has come for full disclosure, and then give, in my own words, the reasons why I think the time has come for full disclosure. And it will, and then I will develop some political aspects of this in other parts of the book where I'll be talking about policy, including monetary policy, and so there'll be a few threads tying.
Well, it is all connected. I mean, if you look at it, it is all connected.
Well, sure.
I mean, if you start looking at all the angles of the, I hate to call it the UFO phenomenon, but the fact that we're not alone, it's all interconnected with the way this planet Earth is run and the way that we have been doing this for eons. And it also has a futuristic kind of look at it, a philosophy that exopolitics is going into, of how to deal with it. In other words, let's have a say in the way this goes in the future. I think that's why we're so elated that you came forth, because it gives us the hope, and we have to give people hope that we can have a say in how the future goes. And also, I wanted to ask you, when will this book come out so we can look forward to it?
Well, I think it's going to take me the best part of 2 years to write, because I want to research it properly.
Okay.
and I want it to be as authentic as I'm capable of making it. So I have no deadline. At the same time, I want to get started
Right.
as soon as possible and get on with it, and we'll put it out. I kind of hope it's out before the next presidential election. But that, you know, more or less, it's not important in a sense, but in another sense, I may have some advice for electors of the kinds of things that alternatives that they should look at in party policy in both the United States and Canada. And it'll be my final effort, I think, so I want to make it a good one. And I'll try and tie together some of the loose ends and make it look as if it's part of a whole.
Okay. You've mentioned the United States and Canada. I want to add another thing. We in Europe are following you very closely because whatever happens here is reflected on the other side of the ocean. And I think what you've done for us is make us one global community as far as understanding that this affects everybody.
Well, it is a global community, and everyone is affected. And I don't restrict it to North America by any means, because a lot of the things I'm talking about are universal.
Right.
The banking system is universal. And the fact that we have starving people in part of the world and rich people overeating in others is universal. And all of these things, so that it's not restricted to any particular geographical area, although, you know, I will concentrate most on the areas I know best. But certainly the thought will be to say we can have a world of peace if we have men and women of goodwill. But what we're missing at the moment are the men and women of goodwill. We're more interested in killing each other than they are in helping each other. And so if somehow we can turn that around and reset our priorities to change the direction of our lives and of our expenditures to emancipate mankind and other kinds, but start with our own, then we can all look forward to the, you know, I'm not a utopian, but we can look forward to something positive and really great for everyone. And it is possible. We have the means, we have the technology, we have everything we need except the political will to do it. And that's what's lacking. And we got off in these tangents that General Eisenhower warned us about. And I guess probably he knew about the UFO situation at the time he said it. Beware of the military industrial complex. And he, I think, probably concluded that some of the information from the ETs was getting into the wrong hands, and that somehow we had to reestablish public control over what was going on.
Well, you've given us some hope, and I thank you so much for this interview. I appreciate your time, and we're 100% behind you, and we'll be waiting for this book.
Well,
thank you so much.
Let's hope we can work together and do something.
Okay. All right. Okay. Okay. What I'd like to say right now is to thank so much the Honorable Paul Hellyer, but mostly in exopolitics, it gives us a lot of things to think about, and we need to develop a philosophy, even on a grassroots level, of how to deal with contacts. So having someone of this caliber validate exopolitics will really help not only us but the whole entire planet.